nuestros panelistas, Justine Merkel, del Sindicato de Reino Unido, Alfonso Cepeda Salas, secretario general del CENTE de México, Damián Cajil, del Sindicato de Australia, y David Satsunga, del Sindicato de Zimbabue. Estos son nuestros panelistas de esta cuarta sesión plenaria. Le cedemos el uso de la palabra a nuestro moderador, Andreas Keller.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Colleagues, friends, I'm looking forward to another interesting, I guess, panel. And after having listened to some songs of one of my favorite singers, Adele, I'm now in a very good mood to do my job, to chair this panel about winning from members, union strategies and successes. In this plenary, we will showcase examples from different regions of recent union successes in advancing the rights and conditions of workers in the further and higher education and research sector. We will reflect on the enabling factors and strategies that unions have implemented to secure these advances, as well as lessons that can be drawn from these experiences. So our objectives are, on one hand, to share examples of union successes and galvanize the EI further and higher education and research membership into action, and on the other hand, to identify enabling factors, elements of successful union strategies and lessons which can be drawn from such experiences. I'm very glad that we have four very promising panelists with me on the stage. But before I am introducing them, I would like to welcome the participants both here in the hall, in this very nice venue in Mexico City, and throughout the world, in the offices, in the living rooms, wherever our online audience is listening to us. Welcome both audiences. Some housekeeping items I would like to share with you. This is, as you know, a multilingual panel, so interpretation is available again in English, French, and Spanish. And of course, there will be an opportunity for participants which are present here in the room to take the floor in the second part of our session. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. As has been mentioned already, I'm representing the German Trade Union for Education and Research, GEW. I'm both Vice President and Board Member in charge of higher education and research of my union, and I'm also proud and glad to be one of the Vice Presidents of the European region of Education International, which is ETUCE. But now I would like to introduce to you our panelists. We have with us, I don't have to introduce him actually again, but it's courteous to do it again, Alfonso Cepeda Salas. Next to me, he is the General Secretary of the Sindicato Nacional de Trabajadores de la Educación, CENTE. Our host, and I would like to take the opportunity to thank you and all your colleagues again for the hospitality, for having chosen this very nice building as our venue. And I'm deeply impressed also by your strength, which you have proved yesterday when we had the welcome address by the President of the United States of Mexico. This was quite impressive. Thank you again. Then we will have Justine Mercer. She is president of the University and College Union, UCU, in the United Kingdom, and as well an Associate Professor of Educational Leadership at the University of Warwick. Welcome, Justine. And then we have Damien Cahill, who is General Secretary of the National Tertiary Education Union, NTEU, in Australia. And before taking on this role in his union, he was an associate professor in political economy at the University of Sydney. Welcome, Damien. Last but not least, we have David Chatsunga, who is the president of the College Lecturers Association of Zimbabwe, COLAZ, and he is also Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Confederation of Public Sector Trade Unions, ZCPSTU, the umbrella body for unions that organize in the entire public sector. Welcome again. Just to frame the following conversation again a little, we, over the past few years, the further and higher education and research sector has witnessed increased levels of, let's say, militancy. And there are a number of success stories, which is encouraging when it comes to union mobilization in the sector. In the previous plenary, we have explored the new challenges that technologies and artificial intelligence raise for the workers in the sectors, and we have learned about ways in which unions may and in fact already do respond. In this changing environment, we hope that this discussion will offer valuable food for thought as we look back on some of the success of our movement and discuss in the afternoon, later on, ways in which we can strengthen it in the coming future to respond to the challenges and opportunities facing our higher education and further education and research sector today. I have several years of experiences both on national level and on international level as a trade union leader, and I've made always the experience it's quite easy to decide on a persuading policy, but it's not that easy to mobilize members and to persuade colleagues, workers to join a union. And therefore I'm quite curious to learn from you, colleagues, how you are managing this, how you have managed this, and what you would propose how to deal with this challenge. Now, finally, we can start with the panel discussion, and I would like to ask first Alfonso from Mexico. Everybody is looking forward to hearing more about your work and success in further and higher education and research. And I would like to invite you to share with us, in a few words, the most significant achievements that your organization, CENTE, has been able to make in the most recent period in this sector. The floor is yours, Alfonso.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much,
estimado moderador.
dear moderator.
Nos da mucho gusto,
Well, we're
colegas,
really
que hoy
glad,
podamos
dear
seguir
colleagues, that we are
reflexionando, que podamos seguir compartiendo
keep reflecting and sharing
con
experiences
nuestra materia
with
de trabajo
our
acerca
subject
también de
matter.
lo que tenemos que
And
hacer
then
para
what do we need to
fortalecer
do
los
to
niveles de
strengthen the
postsecundaria, media superior
post-high
y
school,
superior.
mid and
Quisiera
high
decirles
superior?
que en el caso
So,
de México,
in the case of Mexico,
tenemos en el Sindicato Nacional
in
de Trabajadores
the
de la Educación
CENTE,
cobertura
we
desde
we
educación
cover
inicial
from initial
hasta
elementary
educación
school
superior,
until high education, PhD, and postgraduate. But the public education has not escape from global challenges in terms of the funding that we need so we can have a quality, excellent and inclusive and equal education. So we have been lucky that the President of Mexico will propose the Congress of the Union in two important reforms. One has to do with the obligatoriedness of the state to
educación media superior y superior a todos los estudiantes de nuestro país. Ayer lo comentábamos. Y otra que se refiere a la búsqueda de financiamiento suficiente para que puedan generarse nuevas universidades. Ayer comentábamos también de 202 universidades que se han creado en zonas marginadas, en zonas de bajo
and low development areas. However, they are present. All the privatization phenomena, commercialization that
una amenaza al derecho universal a la educación al priorizar el lucro sobre el valor social.
Gains and
el
social
financiamiento
value.
público a las instituciones de educación postsecundaria superior y la investigación sobre todo representa otro tema crítico.
Are part of another critical problem. Mexico, just to give you an
se ha
example,
priorizado el financiamiento
the
para
funding
educación
for
básica,
elementary
se
school
ha priorizado
has been
para educación
prioritized,
secundaria.
also for
Sin embargo, en lo que
secondary
tiene que ver con
education.
la
But
educación
what
superior, hemos
has to
tenido
do
un
with
rezago
higher
histórico
education, we
que ha
have
propiciado
a
que
historical delay
exijamos al
that
gobierno
made us to
que se
demand the
solucionen
government to
problemas
solve
añejos.
old
Desde el
problems
2008
from
aproximadamente se fueron
2008,
acumulando para acá, se fueron acumulando
up to now,
problemas de
there
salario,
are problems
problemas
in
de
terms
pago
of
de prestaciones
salaries,
y
benefits,
afortunadamente
payments.
hasta lo que va de nuestra gestión
So far in
hemos
our
logrado solucionar
administration,
aproximadamente
we have been able to
210,000
solve
problemas
210,000
de falta de
problems
pago,
of lack of
de
payments,
falta
lack of
de pago también, de
payment
estímulos,
of
de
stimuli,
bonos, de
the
prestaciones,
bonuses,
y ha sido un
benefits,
esfuerzo
and this been
titánico
a
el que ha
titanic
realizado
effort
el área laboral del
performed by
comité
the
ejecutivo
labor
de nuestro
area of the
sindicato.
executive
Por
committee
otro lado,
of our
estos
union.
procesos de
However,
desfinanciamiento
those
abren
financing
paso a
processes
tendencias de
give rise
privatización.
to
La educación
privatization
superior,
trends.
media superior y
Further
superior
and
que abarca
higher
el sindicato
education that the
tiene
union covers
una población
will have
aproximada
a
en educación
population
superior de
in
450,000 compañeros. De ahí tenemos 300,
So from there we have
320,000 en educación media superior y el resto en educación superior. En media superior tenemos preparatorias técnicas, tenemos preparatorias que pretenden abrir la brecha para que los estudiantes puedan ocuparse en actividades que son de alto nivel, por ejemplo en áreas de ciencias del mar, por ejemplo en áreas de
areas or technology areas in companies that they can hire them as technicians.
Y también tenemos en
Also,
educación
we do
superior
have in
los
higher
tecnológicos,
education in the
que son
technological schools that are approximately
205 tecnológicos en el
205
país,
technological
donde
schools
se da la preparación
where
suficiente
all
para
the
que puedan
training
incorporarse
is
nuestros
provided so
estudiantes al
our
mundo
students
productivo.
can
Puedo
go to the
afirmar, sin
productive
temor a
world. I
equivocarme, que las
can
empresas prefieren a los
say
egresados de los
that the
tecnológicos
companies prefer
públicos
the
y a los
graduates of the
egresados de
public
los
technological
tecnológicos
schools
privados. Sin
than
embargo,
the private
sigue la
ones.
presión
So
permanente para generar una tendencia de privatización también en los tecnológicos. Y la cúspide de la pirámide educativa que abarca el sindicato es el Politécnico Nacional. Ayer mencionaba un presidente, el licenciado López Obrador, muy de los mejores, quizá el tercer mejor presidente, el general Lázaro Cárdenas, que creó este Politécnico para darle oportunidad a las familias de bajos recursos para que sus hijos pudieran estudiar una carrera profesional, y esto nos ha dado ingenierías, maestrías, doctorados, investigadores que se han ubicado en otros países y que han generado descubrimientos e inventos muy importantes. Creo que las organizaciones que formamos parte de la internacional necesitamos trabajar, exigir de manera conjunta, hacer sinergia en todo el mundo para que los estados realicen un esfuerzo extraordinario a efecto de incrementar el presupuesto educativo, sobre todo para investigación. Yo lamento mucho decir que en nuestro país la investigación alcanza cuando mucho el 0.45% del Producto Interno Bruto del PIB. Y eso es algo lamentable, porque ahí lo decíamos, lo veíamos ayer con Julián, de países que dedican mucho más que eso para actividades de investigación. Con la investigación viene también lo que necesitamos en cuanto a los grandes objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, que depende de esa capacidad de los gobiernos nacionales para financiar con recursos suficientes a la educación y a la investigación. Por eso, en el CENTE sostenemos con toda firmeza que la educación es una inversión, no es un gasto. Si alguna lección nos dejó la acumulación de rezagos y desigualdades y la pandemia COVID-19, es que los estados nacionales deben hacer un máximo esfuerzo presupuestario. Aquí nos han disminuido sustancialmente la asignación de presupuesto para capacitación y superación profesional de las compañeras y compañeros docentes de todos los niveles. La inversión debe enfocarse en garantizar el derecho a la educación, en contener y revertir la precariedad que afecta el logro de la calidad y equidad, o reducir la incertidumbre laboral que padecen los docentes e investigadores. Dice Susan Hopkins, nuestra presidenta, los gobiernos deben invertir en educación pública. Los sistemas educativos públicos protegen los derechos humanos, la equidad y la igualdad, la paz, la democracia y la justicia climática. Exponer el impacto negativo de la austeridad y la privatización, que son fantasmas que están ahí amenazando a la pública, a la educación pública. Tenemos sólidos puntos de encuentro. Nuestro compromiso con la defensa de la educación pública, con la revalorización de la profesión docente y con nuestra exigencia de que los estados cumplan con un mayor financiamiento educativo. Por la pública, sigamos sumando esfuerzos. Gracias.
Adding up and joining our efforts in IE.
Thank you very much indeed, Alfonso. You have described a lot of challenges, but it's also something like a success story you have in Mexico, obviously. I would like to ask a second question, and I would like to ask you to answer in 1 or 2 sentences, because we are talking about union strategies and success. And I'm keen on learning from you, how did you manage it as a union to have such an impact? Could you give maybe one factor from which you took advantage to achieve all this?
Para nosotros la clave es
To
tener
us, the key
mayor
is to
cantidad
have
de diputados
more
federales,
federal
es decir,
congressmen,
congresistas, tener diputados
that
locales
having
en
local
las entidades
congressmen
federativas,
in the
tener
states of
senadores
Mexico, to have
en el
senators
Congreso,
in the Congress,
porque tenemos
because
una
we
representación
have
muy pequeña,
a very small
5
representation,
diputadas a
5
nivel nacional
congresswomen at the national level
constantemente
that
están
constantly
luchando
are
por las causas,
fighting
por las demandas que
for
nos
the
presentan nuestros
causes
compañeros
and
y que tratan
requests
de incidir en lo
submitted by
presupuestal. Sin
our
embargo,
colleagues
como
and
son muy
trying
pocos,
to
se
impact the
ven
budget, and
abrumados
since
por
they
la
are
mayoría que
very few, they are overwhelmed by the majority that is focusing efforts in other areas in the social, economic, and political life in Mexico. So we need more voices
la Cámara de Diputados, en la Cámara de Senadores y en las cámaras de diputados locales. La estrategia es, y estamos trabajando en eso, tener mucha mayor representación e incidir en el financiamiento que requieren la educación en todas sus áreas y niveles.
By education at all levels.
Thank you very much, Alfonso, again. This is really encouraging what you are doing in Mexico. And I would like to hand over now to Justine from the UK. And Justine, before you start sharing your experience you have prepared, I would like to invite you to ask one question before. Is there one thing which particularly struck you in what Alfonso has shared and with his success story, let's say, something that resonates with your experience maybe, or one key takeaway for you? So in a very few sentences, please.
Thank you very much. So what I find very interesting in what Alfonso said is the way that you are ranking your presidents. So you spoke, for example, about the third best president, and it was obvious yesterday when the president addressed the conference just what high regard he is held in, and I think that's a real lesson for us. It doesn't resonate so much as it is the sharpest of contrasts, because in the United Kingdom, where I come from, we have had 13 years of a conservative government that an extremely right-wing government that has been a disaster for education, and particularly for higher education. We have had 5 different prime ministers, all of whom have been terrible. And I think it's really refreshing to come here and see what a positive relationship you have with your government and the personal warmth with the president that appears to translate into very sensible, supportive, helpful decisions, both financial, of course, because money is incredibly important, but also I get the sense there's a common, there's a synergy of values, that you share the same values in this hall with your president and your government. And that is a really stark contrast with the current government in the United Kingdom, that we hope, of course, we have an election must be within 14 months. We hope for change, but I'm not sure we would even be able to achieve the warmth and the common purpose that has been so obvious here with your president and your government.
Okay, thank you. In spite of not having the same support by the government as in Mexico, you have a very successful and outstanding struggle in the UK. Let's say in Germany, not all of our members are aware what happens throughout the world in other countries, but everybody has heard from the USU and there are strikes in the higher education sector. And therefore, can you tell us, Justine, about your organization's successful mobilization on pension? This is the topic in the UK. What have been the key elements of this success? The floor is yours, Justine. Again.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's really excellent that we are focusing on success stories, because sometimes when you are in the thick of negotiations week after week after week, it's sometimes you lose sight of the bigger picture. And the success story that I'm going to describe, the first thing I should say is that it had nothing to do with the government. The success was not in any way dependent upon government funding. It was a decision that we negotiated with about half of the employers, half of the universities in the UK, that was worth around 15 to 18 billion pounds across across the pension scheme and every member of the pension scheme in their retirement. So about half of the universities in the UK are part of what we call a defined benefit scheme. It's called USS, and a key feature of the defined benefit scheme and why it's so valuable is that on retirement, you are guaranteed an income for life and an income that rises with inflation. It may not match inflation exactly, but it rises with inflation and it lasts for as long as you live. So you don't have to worry if you live longer than expected that you end up having less and less money. And it doesn't depend on individual investments. The risk is shared across, in the case of USS, there are about 450,000 members of this scheme. And the reason that it is so significant, I think, is because it's a victory not just for the about 60,000 members of UCU that are also part of the scheme, but it's a victory for all of those members of the scheme that aren't union members. They are members of the pension scheme, but they aren't union members. They should be, of course, but they aren't. And they have benefited hugely from effectively a 5-year struggle. I'm going to discuss a little bit of the background to put that into context. I should say that for 3 of those 5 years, I led the negotiations, and I think I have some insights from being in all of the negotiations that I will share with you, because I think sometimes from outside the negotiating room, things look different and it looks easier than it was. But in 2017, the employers decided they wanted to close the defined benefit scheme completely, and that everybody would then move to a very different pension where they would have an individual risk. It would be defined contribution, and there would be huge variation in the retirement income that a different member from the scheme got. And we took 14 days of strike action in the beginning of 2018, and we got the employers to reverse their decision. They said they would keep the defined benefit scheme open and that they would work with us on a better way of valuing the health of the scheme. And I want to say that that decision was not unanimously endorsed by the membership. We put it to members and they had a 64% acceptance. So it was quite controversial. The deal that we have just negotiated and the poll closed last Friday, by contrast, 99% of the members that we polled agreed to endorse it. So we've come a long way. Basically, the changes that they wished to impose would have meant about a 35% cut in our guaranteed income in retirement. We had a series of positive and then negative events throughout the course of those 4 years. A constant was that we took strike action. I think a low point was in September 2021, when, following another valuation that happened during the pandemic, the employers imposed huge cuts on us. We voted against it, but we were overruled by the employers. We had taken many days of strike action. We'd also done local marking and assessment boycotts, and still the employers pushed it through. But I think, at that point we were like, will we ever recover this detriment? And in fact we did, because we worked throughout the rest of the years from then, both in terms of showing that the pension scheme was fundamentally healthy and that there was enough money not only to reverse the cuts, but also, and this is completely unheard of, to pay a sum of money to compensate for the 2 years of cuts that we had experienced. It wasn't possible for technical reasons to actually restore it entirely, but we were able to get some money that, again, increases in retirement to make up for the fact that we had those cuts for 2 years. And I want to focus, having given you that background, on 3 things. The lessons learnt, what we consider to be effective union strategies, and the enabling factors. I think the lessons learnt is very clearly never give up. Because, as I say, we had periods in 2018 when we got our defined pension back, but then in 2021 we had a huge cut and people didn't know that we would be able to reverse that. So never give up. Your negotiations are likely to have many years, some steps forward, some steps back. In terms of the effective union strategies, we mobilized members. We had very effective getting the vote out strategies. In the UK, 50% of your membership has to vote in a ballot in order for you to be able to act on the result. And the ballot lasts only for 6 months. So you need to continuously reballot. And we did that. And people got into the habit of voting and voting yes almost continuously. It has to be by post as well. This is the extent of the way our government tries to circumvent union activity. We had different communication strategies for different audiences. We had quite a strong Twitter presence. And of course, because we are educators and pensions can be quite a technical thing, in every institution we had a pensions officer. I'm the one for Warwick, and the pensions officer's job was to go to technical meetings, find out what needed to be done, and then go back and be a bridge with the regular membership, if I can call them that, the regular membership, that weren't so immersed in the technical detail, and let them know how they needed to respond to a consultation, or what they should say when they're trying to convince a member that they need to take yet more strike action or another vote. And we got to the point where actually, in many cases, we were more expert on pensions than some of the vice-chancellors and some of the chief financial officers. In some universities, they were coming to our members, our pension officers, because they knew more and they were respected by members. In terms of the enabling factors, I hope this won't be considered vain, but I think it's important that you have skilled negotiators that act with integrity and that build up trust with the other side outside the heat and the noise of the mobilization and the strike action. You know, I was one of the negotiators we had a group of 5 on our side and 5 on their side, and an independent chair. But that was quite performative. It was very formulaic. This person would say X, that person would say Y, we would have a vote, and things would go very badly for the union. What we had when we won the ballot a year ago, for like the 4th time, the employers reached out to myself and a member of staff and they said, can we talk? And so 2 or 3 of us from our side spoke for months with 2 of them from their side. And that enabled us to work out where we might be able to go and where there might be agreement without the sort of the rhetoric and, you know, the performativity, the banging of the drum. We had honest conversations about what might be possible with each of our, you know, the respective.
Okay, may I ask you to come to an end, please?
Yeah. So 2 other things. We had external favourable conditions with respect to the market and interest rates rising. That did help us. It's not by any means the defining factor, but it did help us. And what I think would help, but we didn't have, and it references what I said earlier, if you have a supportive government, which we absolutely didn't have in the UK, I think that would have made a difference and we may have achieved this victory more quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justine. And congratulations to all what you have reached in the UK, and you have identified a lot of factors which were responsible for your success, but the main message for me was what you have stressed: never give up. And you had, in fact, a long wind in your movement, and therefore it's also an impressive success story. Thank you for having shared it with us. I would like now move to Damien from Australia. And Damien, we have same question before, like to Justine, before we come to your presentation you might have prepared. We have heard inspiring perspectives from both Mexico and UK. Do you want to share your thoughts on what you have learned, either from the UK or from Mexico so far? Very briefly, please, in a few sentences.
Sure, thanks. Very briefly, from Alfonso's talk, one thing that I really, really liked was the picture that you had of the protesting workers who were protesting against privatisation, and they all seemed to be so young. And I thought that was a wonderful thing, because in many countries there's a new generation of young workers coming into higher education. Many of them are marginalised, many of them are in precarious employment, many of them don't have a history of trade union experience. And it's great to see them being represented and getting active through our unions. That's a wonderful thing. On Justine's presentation, you said, Justine, it perhaps looked easier than it was. It did not look easy. I've followed the UCU campaign closely. It's been inspirational. And the way in which you put into practice your words, never give up, has been an inspiration to us in Australia. And it's really helped our struggle, and you've achieved a big win against a determined opponent with life-changing effects. I know there's more to achieve, but I think you've done a fantastic job, and congratulations.
Thank you, Damien. And by the way, Alfonso, thank you, yes. By the way, Alfonso, it was very attentive that you have put an umbrella in our bags yesterday. I wondered why that. But now we are lucky to have one for our walk during lunchtime. But now we will proceed with Damien. In Australia, let's now look to Australia. Your organization has been working to reduce casualisation in the higher and further education and research sector. Could you share, please, with us the strategies that you have implemented there and what you were able to achieve so far? The floor is yours.
Sure, thanks. And I'll simplify what is obviously a much more complex story. So our union represents workers in higher education. We represent both academic staff and professional staff or non-academic staff. Just to give some context to our campaign, in Australia, 70% of all workers are in insecure employment. That means only 30% of workers in our public university sector have permanent, secure jobs. The two big drivers of this terrible situation are things that we've heard about throughout this conference. First, it's the funding situation in Australia. So public funding of universities in Australia is relatively low by OECD standards. And so in that context, universities have attempted to generate additional income through the international student fee market by charging full fees for international students, which is essentially the only source of revenue increase for universities in Australia. At the same time, the governance of universities has become more corporatised in its orientation over the last 20 years as the heads of the big multinational banks and mining companies have come to dominate the governing boards of our public universities, which is a shocking and shameful situation. So that has brought a corporate and managerial mentality to the governance of the universities. These two things in combination, the funding settings and the corporate governance, have led to university managers adopting a strategy of shifting risk, shifting systemic and institutional risk onto staff. And therefore they have employed more and more casual workers, because casual workers in Australia have very few employment rights and they can be dismissed or have their employment terminated at a moment's notice. So it's a strategy, a deliberate strategy that's been adopted by management. The second element of context for our campaign I'll mention very, very briefly is the COVID pandemic. Like in many countries, the COVID pandemic highlighted very starkly the problems, the perverse and terrible problems associated with casualisation and insecure employment, as casual workers were the first to lose their jobs. And that's what happened in the university sector in Australia. When the pandemic began in Australia, the Australian federal government closed the immigration borders in Australia, which meant international students were no longer able to come to study in Australia, which meant that one of the chief sources of revenue for Australian universities stopped immediately, and the Conservative government at the time refused to give additional financial assistance to universities. The response of the universities was to cut jobs. So we had thousands and thousands of workers who lost their jobs in the public university system across Australia, and the casual workers were the first to lose their jobs. As a result of this, coming out of COVID, we as a union determined to fight for the rights of casuals. Casual workers historically had been underrepresented in our union, and I think it was a fair criticism of our union that we hadn't done enough in the past to address the issues faced by casual workers. So we decided to prioritise winning rights for casuals and winning secure jobs through collective bargaining. And we decided to coordinate that across the 37 public universities in Australia to prioritise winning secure jobs and reducing casualisation, among other issues. Obviously, this was going to be a difficult strategy because casualisation was central to the business model of every single university in Australia, and we had low density among our casual workers, low union density. But we'd been helped by the fact that we'd been campaigning against wage theft and casual underpayments for many, many years, and we had uncovered and won back tens of millions of dollars in casual underpayments over the last few years, which meant that university managers felt pressure to deal with the issue of casualisation. Pressure because it had been highlighted as a public issue in the media, but also pressure because they were financially liable for paying back this debt. We began our campaign, which you can see from my T-shirt, and I'll just stand up. Can you see it there? No, you can't. Better Workplaces, Better Universities, it's called. And we took lots of industrial action, not as much as our comrades in the UCU, but we took lots of industrial action. We coordinated our campaign collectively across 37 individual universities, and we had to negotiate individually with every university. And I'm pleased to say we are winning. We had a breakthrough result at a site with probably the least hostile employer, and we have tried to universalise that win at every other university. So a classic example of pattern bargaining. The template was we won enforceable reductions in casualisation of 25%, the conversion of all of the work that was being done by those casual workers into secure jobs, and preferential employment for casuals into those jobs. So we've won so far, and we're still negotiating 1,700 new permanent jobs in the sector in Australia, which represents about 10% of casual jobs. We have won for the first time in our sector paid sick leave for casuals. Casuals in Australia don't have any rights to paid leave of any type, so we've won paid sick leave for casuals. And a great result of this is we've increased our union membership by 5% this year, and 60% of that membership has been of casuals, which is a fantastic achievement. There's more to do, but I'm pleased to report we are pushing back and winning against casualisation. Thanks.
Thank you. Another encouraging and inspiring example how to unionize and mobilize casual workers. And I would like to ask a very last question to you, Damien. You referred to the pandemic, to the COVID pandemic, which made like a magnifying glass problems more visible. So, but I have heard from several countries that as a result of the pandemic, academics, particularly casual workers, get resignated. But how get resignated and not willing to participate in unions or to get mobilized? How did you manage it, in spite of this, to mobilize them?
Thank you. That's a very good question.
3 sentences again. Thank you.
A very good question. What you just described did happen in Australia. So I think there was resentment towards the union because we were unable to save the jobs of casuals during the pandemic. So it did create internal difficulties for us. But I think we faced that criticism squarely, and we had a difficult internal conversation with our members about the need for solidarity, that our permanent members, our members who had good, secure, well-paid jobs, had to make sacrifices and take industrial action and support other workers who did not have secure jobs, who weren't as well paid, and that's how we decided to prioritise winning jobs for casual workers over other issues that the union might take up. It's a very good question, and it was a very, very difficult conversation for the union.
Thank you again. And now, last but not least, I would like to move to David from Zimbabwe. And this is a higher and further education conference, and therefore I'm glad that we, as far as I understood, now are able to hear something from the further education sector as well. In Zimbabwe, David, you with your union have successfully lobbied for a change of legislation as you reported in advance, according to which college lecturers are now under a new employment authority called the Tertiary Education Services Council, and it results in the introduction of new rights for college lecturers, and brings the conditions in the sector closer to the university sector. Therefore, David, I would like to ask you to share with us how were you able to secure these new rights and significant advances for your members in the college sector, and how different or similar was your experience based on what we have heard so far from the other panelists from Australia, from the UK, and from Mexico. The floor is yours, David.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm quite happy to be sharing our story. And like some of my colleagues have rightfully said, it is quite important to share success stories because they inspire us. I am quite inspired by the stories that have been told by my colleagues here, and I can discern a common thread that ran through the stories, that for us to be successful, we should be resilient, and we should be focused. And most importantly, we must work with our members. And that our strategies must always be informed by the reality that we are facing. For example, we came here and we saw the President of Mexico coming to address this meeting. And to me, that is a clear sign that there are ways in which we can have conversations with those who are on the other side of the table. And it is not always about radical unionism. As has been already mentioned, our union, which is not a very big union by any standards, I come from the small nation of Zimbabwe that has got a population of maybe 13 million people. And we have just about 26 tertiary colleges. And that's where we organize. And these are not very big colleges. So we don't have the kind of numbers that we would be common in the global north or in some of the more populous parts of the world. But what did we do as a union? We starting from 2009, because I think this is the most important element of our campaign, that it starts in 2009. And we are coming from a place where we don't enjoy most of the fundamental rights that all workers in the world enjoy. Our members or our academics in our union are operating under what they call in Zimbabwe the Public Services Act. And the Public Services Act is more like a piece of legislation that places workers or as servants in every word. You don't enjoy collective bargaining rights. In fact, what we say in our countries, you have collective begging rights, if begging can ever be a right. And we are therefore unable, we don't have academic freedom. We are part and parcel of the public service as academics. We don't enjoy any autonomy. And so our members, when they elected the National Executive Board that I lead, they gave us the mandate to actually restore their status, to restore the status of college lecturers, because according to them, historically, we used to enjoy a status that was close to that of university academics. But now we were more closer to the public service generally, and we were in what was called the Patterson grading system. I'm sure the Patterson grading system, from what I hear, came from some gentleman called Patterson from Australia. So we had to fight that from 2009, and the strategies that we employed were not necessarily, contrived. Like, we really know that we didn't even know where we were going. We were just shooting arrows in the dark. We were naive in some instances. We used radical approaches at the beginning, like we had a strike, and in that process where you are having a strike and there's a law, the Public Service Act says civil servants cannot go on strike. And the employer then uses the law to victimize you. We had summary transfers of our members, the strike that we had in 2011. But after that, we continued to fight that through other means when we realized that we had been defeated, or our strike had been defeated, because what the employer then did was to bash the union leadership in a clear case of strike the shepherd to scatter the sheep. So that's how it all petered out, and we continued then to find other ways of lobbying and advocating for the change that we wanted. We decided then to drop the radical approach, and we decided then to go the route of lobbying and advocacy, social dialogue. We began to lobby Parliament, we did papers, we knocked doors, we did a lot of legwork from the point of view of the leadership, of course with the instigation of the members. But we did more than that. We also, in 2015, became a member of EI, and we became a part of this family. And from there, we began to also get more educated about some of the methods that we could use to advance our cause. And in the process, therefore, we were able to talk to the authorities and to make them accept us and to listen to our cause and to see the justice of our cause. And it was only in 2018 when, after the coup in Zimbabwe, they called it the coup not coup, that removed Robert Mugabe, and the new president came in. He appointed a new minister who was from our fraternity, and that new minister then, after we had lobbied Parliament, we sent a petition to Parliament. Parliament sent the petition to the minister to have his buy-in. The minister then called us and said, we don't need Parliament to do this. It is actually something that we can fix between ourselves. And this is how we began the process of co-sponsoring a bill between ourselves and the minister. And we called that bill the Manpower Planning and Development Act, or bill. And that bill went through the mill, it went through all the processes, it has a lot of stakeholder buy-in, and in 2020, the president was able to sign that bill into law. And so we now have a new employer called the Tertiary Education Council. And we are very proud of that. And I wanted to emphasize the major tenets of that law that establishes the Tertiary Education Council is that for the first time in the history of our country, academics can now enjoy academic freedom. That law is premised on academic freedom. And I think it's something that we have to appreciate very much. But more importantly, it also guarantees us collective bargaining rights. So for the first time again, we are able to collectively bargain. And thirdly, it brings our remuneration packages much closer to those of university lecturers, which is also what we have also wished for. But there is one important element in terms of the strategies that I think I should mention, and that is the issue of international solidarity. I want to make a shout out to the Canadian Association of University Teachers, who took our union on board. They listened to our story. Of course, we got to them through EI, but they then listened to our story and they said, why don't we have a development cooperation agreement so that we can be able to help you? Because as you say, in the global south, the challenge is always about resources. And sometimes we don't have basic things like just an office desk, you know? But they were able to support us in that respect. But not only them, but they also talked to other unions here present, his union, NTEU, we have UCU. They also have been on board to help our cause. And this has made our union stronger. And so that's our story. I could say more, but I'm immeasurably happy to share a story that is different from some of the stories and the problems that you grapple with. It's a clear case of sometimes you cry because maybe because you have what you consider to be a big problem. Maybe you have no shoes, but someone has no feet.
Okay.
So thank you very much for this opportunity to share our story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Before we open the floor for the audience, I would like to ask you as well a very last question with a request to ask very briefly. It's good to celebrate successes as we do today and to have an exchange about, but I would like to ask you, what are now the next steps ahead in terms of implementing your new act? And do you have any plans how to deal with this and maybe go further steps? Very few sentences, please.
Thank you very much for the question. We are under no illusion that the new act is the end. We very well know that it's the beginning of some new challenges. And the future for us, our work is cut out to then, and we hope again that we'll benefit from the experience that we are receiving from AI, to the extent that we are going to have new service regulations, we are going to have a lot of things that are going to come up that are really novel to us. We don't know about research funding. How are those things managed? I think some colleagues here will be able to help us what it is that we have to do about the service regulations, the policy framework. Our union is to participate in that because we now have the collective bargaining rights, but we have to be part and parcel of whatever new changes that are going to come for our members.
Thanks again, David. And now it's time for you to discuss all what you have heard. We have 25 minutes remaining for a question and answer session. But firstly, I would like to thank all the online attendees for having attended from throughout the world our session, because we are now terminating the live stream, and the next session to be live streamed will be tomorrow at 9 a.m. Mexico time. So thank you, online audience. And we are going on now with the on-site audience and our panelists. So it's up to you now to indicate, to request to speak, if you like to ask questions or if you like to share your own experiences. But please note, as briefer you are with your contribution, with your intervention, as more colleagues are able to speak, and therefore I would appreciate very much if you could as brief as possible. Until now, nobody has requested. The first one I have seen is a colleague from France, then the colleague from Italy. No, not from France. You can correct it. Sorry, from Italy, and over there another two Mexican colleagues. These are the first, so sorry for having confused. And please introduce yourself in a few words, and the floor is yours.
Oui, bonjour. Mon nom est Benoît Lacourcière. Je suis de la Fédération nationale des enseignantes et enseignants du Québec. Je me suis reconnu dans le discours de notre camarade australien. Nous vivons sensiblement les mêmes réalités quant à l'impact du marché des frais de scolarité des étudiantes et étudiants étrangers chez nous, la nouvelle gestion publique, le management. Ma question est, quand vous parlez de coordination pour défendre
when you talk about the coordination to advocate for your reivindication, no? Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
I can ask my question in English.
Lo puedo hacer.
How do you coordinate your negotiations? It is the demands or mobilization of your members, and what are the obstacles, and what are the good things you did with this kind of coordination?
Thank you very much. And now, the Italian colleague, could you indicate again? Show your hands again, please.
My name is Grazia Maria Pistorino, my FLC CGIL, Italy. I would like to offer the FLC CGIL point of view about Italian condition of funding. The ordinary financing fund is the mechanism for the distribution of public fund. The current fund, considering the weight of inflation, is lower than the pre-crisis one, and since 2008 we have lost more than 5 billion of euros. The consequence has been a sharp reduction in staff. In percentage terms, the largest decrease recorded since the economic crisis of 2008 among all sectors of public activity. In the face of this drastic reduction, the contribution of precarious workers has been decisive. They have allowed the universities to maintain their functioning, research and teaching activities. In order to safeguard the university system, we urgently need a further extraordinary intervention on recruitment. The Italian university is based on an evaluation mechanism that determines the allocation of funding on a regular basis. As Julian Garrettman told us yesterday, PBF, performance-based funding, and that has produced only one sure and constant result. Strong universities are getting stronger and stronger, and weak ones are fighting more and more for survival. We need to go back to financing the university system and set ourselves the goal of progressively increasing public resource. Instead, in Italy, we are faced with the choice of the right-wing government led by Prime Minister Meloni, which would even provide for a cut in ordinary university funding. One thing is sure for FLCCGIL together with Educational International. Another economic policy is not only possible, but necessary if we want a fairer world. The future of the new generation depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing these observations and considerations from Italy. I would like now move to the very last table in this row. I had shown two hands, and the first one is the guy who is already holding the microphone.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, Gustavo Michua de México.
Thank you, Gustavo Michua from Mexico. I would like to ask Justin, when she refers to pensions, as you heard yesterday from the President, the issue he has with the teachers sector, well, since 2007 in Mexico, following the Chilean model, we are like in two pension schemes.
Por beneficio definido quienes ingresamos antes del 2007
for the ones that were before 2007 and individual accounts for the ones that were part of it after that. So this is not good. Yesterday you heard that you will have pensions from 30, 40, 45% of the salary that you are receiving right now. The challenge of the union, and this has been proposed by Mr. Alfonso Cepeda with different secretaries, it is to go back to defined benefit scheme. That is, our colleagues will have a pension closer to the existing salary. How, Justin, you managed to have better pensions? What is experience that we can take from you to keep fostering the going back to the defined benefit scheme?
There was another request to speak at the same table, as far as I remember. No. Then let's go on with a colleague from Kosovo.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. The first, I want to congratulate the EI for this conference, and I want to thankful the Mexico for hospitality. I want to share something for Kosovo. In Kosovo is one of the trade unions for education, and in this education there are members, last year they have been 95% the members of all workers in education. But last year we have a strike 5 weeks, and from this time our government, they deleted all our members, and they create a platform e-Kosovo, and our members, they have to register again in this platform. And from that time, we don't have the social dialogue with the government, but we have the collective agreement, and in that collective agreement, our members, they they have many benefits, and they win these benefits. They have 3 salary after retirement. They have a salary every 10 years. They are jubilar salary, and etc. But I want to ask you if in your country is the same problem that our members, they get these benefits. They want more and more benefits. And at this time is the time that's the teacher shortage. Maybe it's to see to this place of working to have the place worked from our syndicate. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing these views from Kosovo. Is there anybody else who requests to speak? I would have one token, let's say, in order to give also the panelists the opportunity to answer and make some final remarks. If not, it's not a must. Over there is one. Okay, and you have already, okay, two very last interventions, and I would like to ask you to be as brief as possible. The floor is yours.
Bonjour, merci à tous les intervenants. Je vais être rapide et bref pour vous l'avez mentionné. Ma question elle est claire.
Thank you for your intervention. I'm going to be brief. As you mentioned before, my question is clear. In our organization, and since 10 years, we have been fighting against casualisation. So, do you have the evaluation of precarious work in your countries? This is the first question. And the second one, what is the relationship that exists or the negative influence of the precarious work in scientific research?
Thank you for these questions. And last but not least, the colleague. Please, the floor is yours.
Buenas tardes a todos. De México, Silvia Luna.
From Mexico, Silvia Luna. I want to ask the panel members about a labor theme. In our country, we give an exceptional value to labor certainty, that is the permanent work and the promotion into the different roles that are equally permanent in the education system in Mexico. Do you have the same characteristics and if the promotion also is regulated? And about social security, I want to ask my colleague of the UK, how much the government contributes and what is the percentage of the salary that is deducted?
Thank you very much for all your interventions. And we have now around 14 minutes remaining for our last panel session. We had some questions particularly addressed to panelists, to Justine about the pension system and the social security systems. And we had one question addressed to Damien about I cannot read my writing again, but you will know it. And then we have some reports and visions from different countries, and the question to all panelists, as I understood, how the precarious employment has a negative impact to the quality of teaching and research, and what about evaluation of these impacts. So I would like to ask first Justine and secondly Damien, because they have been addressed particularly, but afterwards I would also ask Alfonso and David if they would like to comment something. So Justine, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for some really great questions and sharing your experiences. With respect to the pensions, I think the fact that we took 69 days of strike action over 5 years persuaded the employers that they wanted to end the cycle where every year or every 3 years we had industrial action. And we were, I don't know whether this is uniquely so, but we were able to work with the employers to tell the USS trustee board that the methodology they were using to value the scheme was fundamentally flawed, that it had what we called excessive prudence, that they were undervaluing the scheme by billions and billions by being overly cautious. As I said, I think the change in interest rates helped, but without the strike action, we most definitely would not have done as well. But to say, in fact, we get 1/75th of our salary for every year that we're in the pension scheme. So over the course of a year, of a 40-year career, I think we would still be worse off than in the Mexican situation, because most people end up with a salary at the end of a 40-year career that's about half of what they earn before they are, the last year before they retire. So in that sense, it's not as good as some of the other schemes. In terms of funding, for this scheme, there is no government funding at all. Currently, the employers pay 21% of salary and workers pay about 10%, but there is no money from government. With respect to sort of more generally higher education, we do get a small amount. I think it was obvious yesterday in the plenary. The UK has a very small amount of government funding, but most of it comes from student fees and from research, a small amount from industry, but the government, the money from the government is very much smaller and reducing year on year.
Thank you. Damien?
Thanks. So there was the question was about, as I understand it, how do we coordinate our campaign, and do we coordinate both our demands and our mobilisation? And the answer is yes, we coordinate our demands, we coordinate what we're willing to settle for, so we try and coordinate our outcomes, and we try and coordinate our mobilisation to the extent possible. And you asked about the obstacles. And that's relevant. The two biggest obstacles to a coordinated campaign of the type I mentioned in Australia, and with respect to our union, is first the law. So we have quite restrictive industrial laws in Australia, including around strikes, and pattern bargaining is outlawed in Australia. And we also have a highly democratic union, which is a good thing, but it makes it difficult to coordinate in a very democratic union. So the way we do it, very briefly, is we require every branch to have the same claims, common claims, but they can have local claims as well. And we do not allow them to settle a collective bargain unless they have achieved minimum standards. Now that can create difficulties, but it has led to, that's how we've achieved good conditions overall that we wouldn't otherwise have done. And the other way we overcome those obstacles is we make sure we determine those collectively. The claims and the outcomes are determined collectively. The determination to take industrial action is determined collectively. And therefore members have already gone through a process of deciding that is our collective priority, which makes it easier when difficult decisions are necessary around those things.
Thank you, Damien. David, is there anything you would like to comment now?
No, not much, but maybe to just say, in our kind of situation, in terms of the obstacles that we often encounter, these have to do with operating in an environment character where mostly college leadership, especially the principals, are political appointees. We enjoy a lot of impunity, and to navigate that, you need to be very crafty and to appreciate that this is your reality.
Thank you. Alfonso, hay una cosa que quieres comentar.
Would you
por
like
favor?
to comment on something?
Muchas gracias
Well, thank
por
you
los
very much,
cuestionamientos,
Alfonso,
por las
for your
reflexiones.
questions,
Para
reflections.
nosotros es
Well,
muy
to us,
lamentable
it's
que en Italia
regretful
se
that
esté
in
viviendo
Italy
una lucha
you
tan
are
fuerte por
experiencing
sobrevivir luego de la crisis
a
económica que
struggle
trajo
to
consigo
survive
la
after the
crisis
economic
sanitaria. Y
crisis
somos solidarios
that also
con
was
ustedes.
followed by
El hecho
the
de
pandemic.
tener un gobierno
So
de
the
derecha
fact
es
of
un
having
problema, porque lo que hemos venido arrastrando nosotros aquí en México fue
What we
porque
have had
tuvimos
in
casi de
Mexico
manera
is
consecutiva dos
we
gobiernos
have
de
like
derecha
two
y uno de centro derecha.
governments
Y hasta que
consecutively, and
la tendencia de izquierda
the
triunfó en el 2018
trend,
fue que empezaron a
succeeded in
voltear hacia nosotros y tratar de
and they
ayudarnos a resolver
started
nuestros
to
problemas.
help our problems.
Se preguntaba aquí si hay alguna
is
estadística
there,
sobre empleo precario.
statistics
Quiero
about
decirles que
precarious work? I want to
aproximadamente
tell you that
350,000
approximately
compañeros de personal de
350,000
apoyo y
colleagues of
asistencia en
support
educación, ayer lo
staff
mencionaba,
and assistance in
percibían
education earned
6,000 pesos que
6,000
equivalen
pesos that equals
aproximadamente a
approximately
$300
to $300
mensuales.
on
Y que
monthly.
en los últimos 2
And in the
años
last 2
hemos
years,
logrado
we
un
have been
incremento
able
del
to increase
74% para ellos.
74% for them.
Y a nosotros nos parece
We think that
importante.
this is relevant.
Tuvimos una etapa de casi 2
time
décadas
like 2
donde se dio
decades
este fenómeno
where this
de que a
phenomenon
la gente, a los docentes, al personal de apoyo, los contrataban por honorarios o los contrataban por compensación o de manera interina, y fue creciendo tanto que cuando nos reunimos por primera vez con el presidente López Obrador, ese fue nuestro primer tema que le planteamos, que había miles y miles de compañeras y compañeros que estaban en esta condición, que no tenían certeza laboral. Y fue sensible, el presidente le dio indicación al secretario de entonces de que este fuera un tema de prioridad para la Secretaría de Educación Pública. Y como ayer se mencionó, en el periodo hemos logrado darle su plaza de base, su certeza laboral a más de 950,000 compañeros entre personal de apoyo, personal docente de todos los niveles, Y yo quiero decir que celebro que la Internacional de la Educación haya incluido aquí
International Education
de la seguridad social. Hace tiempo, desde el Congreso de Bangkok, y un poquito antes que nosotros insistíamos en que era necesario revisar los sistemas de pensiones del mundo, porque realmente están en una situación muy complicada de mediano y largo plazo.
Complicated situation in the mid and the long term, and it was necessary to find
por un lado a los jubilados y pensionados, pero también por el otro ir revisando la proyección que hay, la expectativa que hay para quienes se tienen que pensionar de manera jubilar, de manera obligada por cuentas individuales. Es un esquema neoliberal, un esquema que planteó en su momento el Banco de México, el Banco Mundial y el Fondo Monetario Internacional a los países que se inscriben dentro de la OCDE y que se dio casi de manera obligada. Aquí se hizo en 2007 esta reforma, pero como ayer decíamos, la expectativa de jubilación no rebasa el 30% del último salario para cuando estos compañeros jóvenes que
when these young that started working in 2007 or when they will be retired. So we thank you for all the information given by the UK colleagues, and also we would like to exchange with Canada's colleagues if they are still having this
jubilaciones y pensiones tan exitoso que tiene ya muchos años de prevalencia en Canadá y que le da esa tranquilidad y esa seguridad en su retiro a nuestras compañeras y compañeros docentes y de personal de apoyo. Si se me permite, en cuanto a nivel superior, olvidaba decir también que aquí se incluyen las escuelas normales, que son formadoras de docentes y que desafortunadamente también han sufrido una disminución importante en la asignación presupuestal. Tendremos que luchar por eso también, porque son más de 170 instituciones de formación profesional urbanas y rurales, y es una lucha que también tendremos que dar. En general, creo que son muy interesantes los planteamientos que aquí se hacen. Y creo, sin temor a equivocarme, que en las sesiones que vienen habrán de surgir otros temas que igualmente nos van a motivar para intercambiar experiencias y para ver cómo encontramos juntos el camino de reivindicar en todo el mundo a los trabajadores de la educación.
Thank you, Alfonso. This was almost sort of conclusions. Thank you very much for these reflections. We are perfectly in schedule. It's 5:30, but I would like to ask you for a very last challenge. I would like to ask you a question with a request to answer in one sentence without semicolons, just one sentence. In kind, you had the opportunity to go for some months to another country, UK, Australia, Kenya, Mexico, not your own. Which one, in order to learn from the trade unions there, which one would you choose, Alfonso? Is there one of the countries you would stay for a few months in order to learn how trade unions there work and how they succeed? One sentence.
Sin duda, en Reino Unido.
Well, no doubt about it, United Kingdom, because they have faced terrible problems and they were stuck in the fight and the strategies that they use take time, but they are very successful. And I think that I will choose to go to the United Kingdom. Very good.
Thank you. Justine.
Thank you very much.
Where do you want to go?
So UCU has strong links with many, many countries internationally, but what quite often happens for the president is that we go to Colombia. So the president last year went, and it may well be that I can this year. Because my understanding is that Colombia is the most dangerous country in the world to be a trade unionist, based on the statistics about the number of trade unionists who are murdered, who disappear, who are falsely imprisoned, and so forth. So,
thank you.
Yeah, it's a quite sad reflection, but I think it's honest.
Thank you very much, Justine. And Damien? Where do you want to go?
Yeah, well, of the countries represented here on the stage, I think I would love to travel to Zimbabwe, and just hearing from David's experience, a country where collective bargaining rights did not exist, where academic freedom did not exist, and where you've fought to win those rights. It's a very different context from Australia, and it would be great to learn from your experiences.
Thank you. And David from Zimbabwe, where would you like to go?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to go to Mexico. I would like to know how a union could make their president an ally.
Thank you. And thank you very much again to all the panelists for their contributions. And they have deserved another applause, I think. We trade unionists are champions in complaining about the circumstances, about cuts and bad working conditions, but it's important also to talk about successes. And we have managed to do so today, and this made me glad, and this encourages all throughout the world to succeed in our struggle. And therefore, thank you very much again. And before we go to lunch, I would like to make I would like to share very few information for you, with you. First of all, I would like to tell you that we will be back here in the plenary after lunch at 2:30 p.m. for an interactive workshop. And secondly, I would like to draw your attention to the two side meetings, which are starting already at 1:30 p.m. in the second half of the lunchtime. Information on the rooms where we are gathering then will be available on the screens. You are invited to start joining the meetings 5 minutes earlier at 20:25 p.m. so that we can start on time and be back in plenary at 2:30. Thank you very much for your attention and enjoy your lunch.
Very well. Very well. Very well.